Konnichiwa. Today, we're going to talk about some of the ways in which the standard conventional explanations of Japanese lead you out into the desert and then fly away in a helicopter laughing. We've talked in the earlier lessons in this series about how that happens in relation to the fundamental structure of the language, but this also happens at a later stage with the explanation of all kinds of what they call grammar points. And one of the main causes of this is the fact that they fail to recognize what words actually are and what they actually do. So we're going to take as an example mama, the word mama. Now, this can mean a mother or the mistress of a bar or a cafe, but we're talking about it in the other sense, the more abstract sense, which, if we look at traditional explanations, they seem to have various opinions on what part of speech it is. I've even seen it described as a particle, which it certainly isn't. And they tell you that it means as it is, as we wish it to be, as we would like it to be, and it means a state or a condition. Now, all those things are things that we might see in English in relation to certain uses of the word, but none of them express what the word actually means. In any case, if it meant as it is, or as we wish it to be, what kind of a word would it be? So the first thing to ask ourselves is, what kind of a word is it? And as I explained in our last lesson, nearly all Japanese words fall into one of three categories: nouns, verbs, and adjectives. Now, mama is not a verb. It doesn't end in ru or any u, ro, kana. It's not an adjective, doesn't end in e. So the chances are it's a noun, and that's exactly what it is. It's a noun. So, what kind of a noun is it? What does it mean? What is a mama? A mama is a thing, it's a noun. What kind of a thing is it? Well, it's a very simple thing, a very straightforward thing. And once we know what it is, we can understand it in all circumstances. A mama is an unchanged condition. Wherever you see mama, you can read unchanged condition. There's one circumstance in which it has a slightly extended meaning, and apart from that, which is very simple, and we'll come to that shortly, we have the definition, the understanding of mama, unchanged condition. So let's look at some of the ways in which it's used. We can say, Shizen no mama no mori. That's a forest in its natural state. Shizen is nature, and mama is unchanged state or unchanged condition. So, Shizen no mama is the unchanged condition of nature. Shizen no mama no mori is a forest in the unchanged condition of nature. Now, when you're in Japan, somebody may offer you edamame, which are beans which grow from the branches of trees, which is why they're called edamame, which means branch bean. And you might look at them, they're not cooked or anything. You might say, Sono mama de taberareru no? Can you eat them just as they are? Can you eat them in their unchanged condition? Now that de is in fact the copula. So we're saying, being their unchanged condition, can we eat them? Now there's one thing we can do with mama that we can't do with all nouns, and that is that we can drop that de. So we can say, Sono mama taberareru. Now, we can say that this is because mama is something like an adverbial noun that we discussed last week, where you're allowed to drop the particle in certain cases, but I don't think we necessarily even have to go that far. An unchanged condition is by definition a condition that could change, but hasn't changed. So, I think in cases like this, if we say, Sono mama de taberareru, we're saying, Sono mama taberareru, without the de, I would say, is treating that sono mama like a relative time expression. We're saying, while they're in their unchanged condition. So we're essentially talking about a time period during which they are in their unchanged condition. So this is actually how I would tend to look at it. During the period where they're in their unchanged condition, can we eat them? In any case, there's no doubt what the word means. It means unchanged condition. We can say pajama no mama, äta gohan wa jabiru. That means eat breakfast while we're still in our pajamas. In other words, in the unchanged condition of being in our pajamas, eat our breakfast. And as we can see, once again, the implication here is that the condition could change, but hasn't changed. Gintsumademu wakai mama de hitai. I'd like to stay young forever. I'd like to stay in the unchanged condition of being young forever. And notice here that we're saying wakai mama. So you see wakai, the adjective, is doing what adjectives always do, qualifying a noun. And the noun it's qualifying is mama, the unchanged condition of being young. Now, there's a use of mama that you'll probably come across quite often, and that is omoi no mama or kokura no mama. And what this means is in the unchanged condition, that's in our thoughts or in our facts. So what does this actually mean? Well, it's always applied to something that is outside ourselves. So we're talking about something outside ourselves being in the unchanged condition, the exact same condition as what is inside ourselves. So this essentially means making the outside world conform to our thoughts, our desires, our will. And it can, under certain circumstances, imply selfishness, but it doesn't need to. I think the first time I heard it was in an anime where the characters were underwater. They were able to breathe, but they found that they couldn't move the way they wanted to, just as one can't in water. And they said, Omoi no mama ni bugoke nai. We are unable to move in the unchanged condition of our thoughts, or the unchanged condition of our will or desire. Now, we should understand here that omoi sometimes does imply desire. For example, when we say tata omoi, which is literally one-sided thought or one-sided thought, what that actually means is unrequited love. It means having a desire for someone, but it's only one side of the desire. The other person doesn't reciprocate that desire. So it's kata omoi, one-sided thought or one-sided desire. So omoi no mama is in the unchanged condition of one's thought or desire. And it's really from this use of mama that we get wagamama, which I'm sure you've heard, which means selfish or selfishness. Why does it mean that? Well, waga means I or we. And it can be put next to a noun to denote possession of it. So we can say waraya, which means my house or our house. Wagamama means my unchanged condition. But this clearly is influenced by expressions like omoi no mama or kokura no mama. So this wagamama means my unchanged condition, implying my will, wanting the world to go in accordance with my will, wanting the world to be omoi no mama, kokoro no mama. So as we see the whole of mama, we don't have to have all these different definitions of it. We can see that every time we use it, it means the same thing. It brings unchanged condition. If you have any questions or comments, please put them in the comments below. And I'm Announcer and usual. I'd like to thank my Gold Kokeshi patrons who make these videos possible, and all my patrons and supporters on Patreon and everywhere. And I'd like to thank you for attending this lesson. Korekara mo yoroshiku onegai shimasu. Class dismissed.